The day had started like any other for him. He never imagined that one small moment would change his life forever. It was a warm afternoon, and he had been invited to a social gathering by a close friend. He didn't really want to go at first, because he was not the kind of person who enjoyed large crowds. He preferred quiet places where he could sit, think, and just be himself. But his friend insisted, saying that it would be fun and that he needed to get out of his comfort zone, for once. So reluctantly he agreed. The place was filled with laughter, chatter, and the sounds of music playing in the background. People were talking in groups, some were taking pictures, and others were busy making new connections. He walked in quietly, keeping his hands in his pockets, trying not to draw too much attention to himself. He wasn't shy, but he wasn't loud either. He was someone who blended into the background, and he was comfortable with that. But then, as his eyes scanned the room, he noticed her. She wasn't the loudest person in the group, yet somehow she was the brightest. There was something about the way she carried herself, confident yet graceful, that instantly caught his attention. She was standing with a group of her friends, laughing and talking as if the whole world was in her hands. The moment he saw her, he felt something shift inside him, though he couldn't explain what it was. He tried to look away, not wanting to seem obvious, but his eyes kept finding their way back to her. And then it happened. She turned and their eyes met. It was brief, just a second or two, but it was powerful enough to make his heart skip a beat. He thought she would simply look away, like most strangers do when caught staring. But instead, she smiled. That smile was warm, easy, and filled with a kind of playfulness that he couldn't ignore. And before he could process what was happening, she turned to her group of friends, pointed toward him, and with a voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, she announced, "This is my husband." For a moment, the world around him froze. He wasn't sure if he had heard it correctly. Did she just say that? Her friends burst into laughter, some teasing her, others looking at him with curious eyes. He felt his cheeks turn red, and his heart began to race. He had never met her before, had never spoken a single word to her, and yet here she was introducing him to her friends as her husband. His first reaction was confusion. He thought maybe it was a joke, something she said just to get her friends laughing. He tried to laugh along, though his voice cracked slightly because he was caught off guard. But what unsettled him the most wasn't the words. It was the way she looked at him after saying them. She didn't laugh like her friends did. Instead, she smiled at him again, this time softer, almost as if she meant what she had just said. That smile stayed in his mind. It wasn't teasing or mocking, it carried a sense of certainty, as if she knew something he didn't. It was playful, yes, but also strangely sincere. He found himself wondering, why did she say that? The rest of the evening went by in a blur for him. Everywhere he went, people kept jokingly calling him the husband. Some asked how long they had been married, others teased him about how lucky he was. He kept laughing it off, telling them it was just a misunderstanding, but deep inside he couldn't stop thinking about her. He replayed that moment again and again in his mind, the way she had looked at him, the confidence in her voice, and that unforgettable smile. He tried to convince himself that it was nothing, just a silly comment made in the heat of the moment. But no matter how hard he tried, the thought kept returning. Why would she choose him, a complete stranger in the crowd, to say something so bold about? She didn't even hesitate. She said it like it was the most natural thing in the world, and then she smiled as though she had already known the story that was about to unfold. Later in the evening, he found himself standing near the refreshment table, quietly sipping his drink and watching the crowd. He hadn't noticed that she had walked up behind him until he heard her voice. "You don't look like someone who enjoys these kinds of gatherings," she said. He turned, and there she was, standing right beside him, holding her own drink. For a moment he didn't know what to say. "You're right," he finally admitted with a small laugh. "I'm more of a quiet person." She smiled again, the same smile that had unsettled him earlier. "Then I guess you're wondering why I called you my husband in front of everyone." He froze for a second. She had read his mind. "Yes," he said honestly. "I was a little surprised." Her eyes twinkled with amusement. "I just felt like saying it. Sometimes you meet someone, and something inside you just knows. Maybe it's silly, but I don't regret it. He didn't know how to respond to that. Part of him wanted to laugh it off, to treat it as a playful joke. But another part of him, the deeper part, felt something stir inside. He didn't know her yet, didn't even know her full name. But there was a strange pull, like fate had just tapped him on the shoulder. They stood there for a few more moments, talking about little things, the music, the food, how crowded the place was. But the whole time, his mind kept circling back to her earlier words. And though he didn't say it out loud, a thought quietly grew inside him. What if she wasn't wrong? That night, when he finally left the gathering and walked home, the world around him seemed different. The streets looked the same, the air felt the same, but something inside him had changed. He couldn't forget her smile, her words, and the way she had looked at him, like she already knew he was someone important in her story. He didn't understand it yet, but he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The days after that gathering felt different for him. He tried to go back to his normal routine, work, study, his usual quiet evenings. But something inside kept pulling his thoughts back to her. It wasn't just the fact that she had called him her husband in front of everyone. It was the way she had done it without hesitation, and the way her smile carried a strange kind of truth. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't brush it aside as a simple joke. Her face lingered in his mind, especially that moment when she stood next to him at the refreshment table. She had spoken so casually, as if the bold statement she made about him wasn't odd at all. It left him restless, both curious and confused. He wanted to see her again, to ask her more, to understand what made her so certain about him. But he wasn't sure if fate would bring them together again. He didn't have to wait long. A week later, his friend invited him to another group outing. He wasn't eager to go at first, but when he learned she would be there, something inside him stirred. He told himself it was just curiosity, but deep down he knew it was more than that. He wanted answers, yes, but he also wanted to feel that strange spark again. When he arrived, the group was already gathered. She was there, laughing with her friends, and just like before, she seemed to stand out from everyone else. The moment she noticed him, her face lit up. It wasn't a surprised reaction. It was almost as though she had expected him to come. She walked toward him with that same smile that had unsettled him the first time. "So, husband," she teased lightly, "you came." The word made his heart skip again. He laughed nervously, scratching the back of his neck. "I guess I did." From that moment on, the group teasing started again. Some joked about their marriage, others playfully asked when the wedding was. He tried to laugh along, but he noticed something important. While everyone else treated it as a joke, she never corrected them. She let them laugh. She let them tease. And through it all, she remained calm, smiling softly every time her eyes met his. The evening unfolded with games, music, and chatter. But unlike the first time, he found himself more at ease. Whenever she was near, he felt comfortable, as though her presence had a way of calming his nerves. They sat together during dinner, talking about small things, the food, their favorite songs, funny stories from school. It was casual conversation, but underneath it he felt something deeper growing. Later, when the group decided to play a game, she was asked to describe her ideal husband. Everyone leaned in, expecting her to give some funny or exaggerated answer. She paused for a moment, then smiled and said, "Someone who understands silence. Someone who doesn't need to fill every moment with words, but when he does speak, his words mean something." The group clapped and teased her again, throwing his name into the mix, but he sat there quietly, stunned. It felt like her answer wasn't just a random thought. It felt directed, almost as if she was describing him. As the night ended, he walked home with a whirlwind of emotions. He kept replaying her words, her smile, and her easy confidence. The more time he spent around her, the more he realized that her bold declaration at the first gathering might not have been random at all. Maybe she really believed what she had said. Over the next few weeks, fate seemed to keep placing them in the same places. Sometimes it was planned. group hangouts or study sessions, but other times it felt completely accidental. He would run into her at the library, or at a small cafe, or even on the street while running errands. Each time she greeted him with that same warm smile, as if every meeting was proof of something she already knew. Their conversations began to grow deeper. She shared stories about her family, her dreams of what she wanted to achieve in life, and the struggles she had faced along the way. She wasn't afraid to be open, and he admired that about her. With her, he felt seen in a way he never had before. She listened to him carefully, never judging, always encouraging. One evening, as they walked together after a group dinner, he finally asked her the question that had been sitting in his heart. "Why did you say that the first day we met? Why did you tell your friends that I was your husband?" She looked at him, her expression calm but serious. "Because when I saw you, I felt something," she said softly. "I can't explain it in logical words. It was just a feeling, like I already knew you, like I had been waiting, and there you were." He stopped in his tracks, trying to process her words. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't teasing. She was telling him the truth, straight from her heart. "I know it sounds strange," she continued, "and maybe you think it was silly, but I don't believe it was a mistake. I think sometimes we just know when someone is meant to be a part of our life." Her honesty left him speechless. He didn't know how to respond, but inside something stirred again. It wasn't fear this time. It was hope. From that day forward, things between them changed. He no longer looked at her as just someone he happened to meet at a gathering. He started to see her as someone who might actually be a part of his story, someone whose presence had already begun to change him. Still, he struggled with doubt. Part of him wanted to trust her words, to believe in the strange connection she had described. But another part of him was afraid of getting too close, afraid of making promises he couldn't keep. He wasn't used to someone looking at him with so much certainty. He didn't know if he could live up to that. But every time he saw her smile, the fear faded, even if only for a moment. Her smile carried something powerful. It told him that she wasn't afraid, that she believed in something bigger than just chance meetings. And slowly, without even realizing it, he found himself starting to believe too. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if her bold words would ever truly come true. But what he did know was that he couldn't imagine walking away. Somehow she had tied her story to his with just a smile and a sentence, and now he was beginning to feel that maybe, just maybe, she had been right all along. The more they met, the more it felt like the world itself was playing a quiet game of destiny with them. At first he thought it was just coincidence, running into her at the cafe where he often went to read, seeing her in the library where she came to study, or catching sight of her while walking down the same street. But after it kept happening again and again, he began to wonder if it was really chance, or if there was something bigger at work, something invisible guiding them closer. Each time they crossed paths, it no longer felt awkward like it had in the beginning. Instead, it felt natural, almost as if she had always been meant to be there. She greeted him warmly every time with the same smile that had once startled him, but now made him feel at ease. He realized he was beginning to look forward to those moments, no matter how small they were. Their conversations started growing longer, stretching far beyond casual small talk. They spoke about life, about the kind of people they wanted to be, about their hopes for the future. She told him about her love for books, her dream of traveling to different countries, and her desire to do something meaningful in her life. He in return opened up about his own dreams, though he admitted that he often struggled to believe they were possible. She listened carefully, always encouraging him, telling him that nothing was impossible if he believed in himself. He noticed that she had a way of making him feel understood, even when he didn't say much. She never forced words out of him, never pressured him to speak. She had said once that silence meant something to her, and he was beginning to understand what she meant. When they sat together, sometimes even without speaking, it felt comfortable, like silence was its own language between them. Still, there was a question that kept troubling him. He knew what she had said that first day. Calling him her husband was more than just a random joke. He could see it in the way she looked at him, the way she acted when they were together. She truly believed there was something between them, something important. But he wasn't sure if he was ready to believe the same. Doubt lingered inside him. He often asked himself, why me? She could have chosen anyone. She was bright, confident, and people naturally liked her. Yet, for some reason, she had chosen to believe in him, someone quiet and often unnoticed by the world. He wondered if he was truly good enough for the certainty she carried in her heart. One evening, after a long day, they found themselves walking home together again. The streets were quiet, lit by the soft glow of the street lamps. They walked, slowly, not rushing, enjoying the peaceful night. He decided to ask her the question that had been sitting in his chest for weeks. "Do you ever worry?" he said quietly. "That you're wrong about me?" She looked at him with calm eyes, her footsteps never slowing. "No," she said simply. Her answer shocked him. "Not even once?" he asked. She shook her head, her smile gentle. "No, I don't need to doubt what I feel. It doesn't mean I know exactly how the future will look, but I know what my heart tells me. And it tells me that you're not just someone who came into my life by accident." Her words sank into him deeply. He couldn't reply right away because his emotions were tangled. Part of him wanted to accept her certainty, to let it comfort him. Another part still held on to fear. Fear of what would happen if he failed to be the person she believed he was. As days passed, he noticed her actions spoke even louder than her words. When he felt low or uncertain, she was there, reminding him, without even trying, that he wasn't alone. If he was quiet, she didn't push. If he laughed, she laughed with him. Slowly, without realizing it, she was teaching him what it meant to be cared for in a way that was both light and steady. Their friends continued to tease them about the husband title, and though he used to laugh nervously, he noticed that now he no longer minded. Sometimes, when she wasn't looking, he even smiled to himself about it. It was strange how something that had once embarrassed him had begun to feel almost right, as though those words were planting roots in his heart without him noticing. One afternoon, they went to a park together. It was a simple outing. Nothing special, just walking, talking, sitting under a tree. Children were playing nearby, their laughter filling the air. At one point, she pointed to a small boy running around and said softly, "Do you see him? He reminds me of how life should feel: free, simple, full of joy." He looked at her, noticing how her eyes sparkled when she spoke, and for a moment he forgot to breathe. He realized that he was no longer just curious about her. He was beginning to care deeply, more than he wanted to admit to himself. But with that realization came another fear. What if he allowed himself to fall, only for everything to disappear later? He had always been cautious with his heart, protecting it from disappointment. Now, standing at the edge of something new, he wasn't sure whether to step forward or hold back. Yet every time doubt crept in, she seemed to chase it away with her presence. Her faith in him, her calmness, her smile. It all made him want to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a mistake. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought about her words again. Sometimes you just know. He wasn't sure if he knew yet, not in the way she did. But he couldn't deny the truth either. He wanted to know. He wanted to understand what it was she saw in him, what made her so certain. And so, quietly, without realizing it, he began to let down his guard. He started to allow himself to imagine what it would mean if her words came true. He didn't say it out loud, but in the secret corners of his heart, a new thought began to grow. Maybe she was right all along. Life has a way of testing people at the very moment they begin to feel safe. For him, the test came quietly but heavily. He had been working hard, carrying responsibilities that often weighed him down. He rarely spoke about his struggles, preferring to keep them hidden behind a calm face. But deep inside, he was battling fears about his future, about whether he was strong enough to stand on his own, about whether he would ever truly achieve the things he dreamed of. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, he found himself sitting alone in his room, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts kept circling back to the same dark place. He felt tired, uncertain, and for the first time in a long while, deeply discouraged. He wondered if maybe he wasn't enough, not just for himself, but also for her. She had so much confidence in him. But what if she was wrong? What if she saw something in him that didn't really exist? The next day when they met, she noticed right away that something was different. His smile was smaller, his eyes distant. She didn't ask him many questions at first. Instead, she simply walked beside him, quietly matching her steps with his. After a while, when the silence grew heavy, she gently asked, "What's on your mind?" He hesitated. He wasn't used to sharing the parts of himself that felt weak. But her voice carried warmth, a patience that made him believe it was safe to speak. And so slowly he told her about his doubts, how he feared he wasn't enough, how sometimes the weight of everything felt too much to carry, how he wondered if he could ever become the man she believed he already was. She listened carefully, not interrupting, not trying to fix his words. When he finished, she smiled softly, though her eyes carried a seriousness that showed she had been listening with her heart. "Do you know why I believe in you?" she asked. He shook his head. "Because even when you doubt yourself, you still keep moving. You think being strong means never being afraid, but it doesn't. Strength is carrying your fears and still walking forward. That's what I see in you. That's why I called you my husband that day. Not because I thought you were perfect, but because I saw a heart that doesn't give up." Her words reached him in a way nothing else could have. He had always thought of himself as ordinary, someone who blended into the background. But to her, he was someone worth believing in. And in that moment, he realized how deeply her presence mattered. Over the weeks that followed, her support became his anchor. Whenever life pushed him down, she was there, sometimes with words, sometimes just with her presence. She didn't try to solve his problems for him, but she gave him the strength to face them himself. Slowly, he began to notice a change in himself. He wasn't just surviving his struggles anymore. He was learning to grow through them. One evening, when he had finally overcome a challenge he thought would break him, he found her waiting for him outside. She smiled as he approached, and for the first time, he saw something new in her eyes. Pride. Not pride for herself, but pride in him. "You. See?" she said softly. "You are stronger than you think." For a moment he didn't speak. He just stood there looking at her, realizing how much she had become a part of his life. Her bold declaration at that first gathering no longer felt strange. It felt like the beginning of a promise that had carried him to this moment. And as he walked home that night, he understood something he hadn't before. He was no longer afraid of her certainty. He was starting to share it. Time has a way of revealing the truth of people's hearts. What had begun as a playful statement had slowly turned into something real, something that neither of them could ignore anymore. Their bond was no longer built only on chance meetings or light-hearted teasing. It had grown through late-night conversations, shared silences, and the challenges they had faced side by side. He realized one day, as they sat in a quiet corner of the park, that he could no longer imagine his life without her. She had become the person he thought about in the morning, and the person he wished to share his thoughts with at night. She was not just someone who had walked into his life unexpectedly. She was someone who had given meaning to his days. As they talked about their dreams, he found himself speaking differently than before. Once he used to say, "I want to do this." Now, without even noticing, he had begun to say, "We could do this." It was no longer just his journey, it was theirs. One evening, they were introduced to new people at a gathering. It was the IDR, same kind of setting where their story had begun. When it came time to introduce himself, he paused for a moment, looked at her, and smiled. Then, with a calm confidence that surprised even him, he said, "This is my wife." The words felt natural, effortless, as if they had been waiting inside him all along. She looked at him, her eyes widening slightly in surprise, before her lips curved into that familiar smile, the same smile she had given him the very first day, the smile that had started everything. But this time the smile carried something more. It carried confirmation, joy, and the unspoken words, "I told you so." Their friends laughed, just like before, but he didn't feel nervous this time. He felt proud, steady, and certain. The title, that had once embarrassed him, now felt like the truest thing he could say. As they walked home afterward, she teased him gently. "So you finally admitted it," she said, her voice light but her eyes shining. He laughed softly, looking at her with warmth. "I guess it just took me a while to catch up to you." She smiled again, the same smile that had anchored him through doubt, through fear, through every uncertain step. That smile was no longer just a playful gesture. It was the foundation of their story. What had started as a bold, unexpected declaration in a crowded room had become the truth of their lives. She had seen something in him before he had seen it in himself, and she had never let go of that belief. Now, standing beside her, he finally understood what she had known all along. Sometimes the heart knows the truth before the mind is ready to believe it. And so, with her hand in his and her smile lighting the way, he walked forward into a future he no longer feared. For the first time, he didn't just wonder what if. He knew. She was his, and he was hers.